She has a background in logic and linguistics and is one of the pillars of Scrumming. She built the Scrum at Scale community and is now the director and head of the new licensed Scrum program. Please welcome Jessica Larsen. You might know our next guest from the movie Ian Send's Super Scrum Master. He is a West Point cadet, former fighter pilot, college professor. He was CTO of 11 different companies. He's a co-signatory of the Agile Manifesto and the co-creator of Scrum. If you like to disrupt whole industries, please join Dr. Jeff Sutherland.
Thank you, Peter, and everyone. I'm really excited to share some of the research that Jeff and I have done on this topic and some of the learnings that we've reached along the way. This is definitely something that we're quite passionate about and truly believe that respect in the workplace is essential for unleashing talent, creating value, and all things good. So I would actually like to start us off by taking a quick glance back to last year. The year was 2019, and corporations spent more time, money, and effort than ever before on attracting and retaining talent. And actually, 95% of that hiring was done to fill existing positions. So that suggests a pretty high rate of turnover. Now, today, we find ourselves experiencing an employment crisis amidst a global pandemic. But coming out of this, I would like to think that we'll be seeing a market where tens of millions of people are returning to work. And with that in mind, I want to talk a little bit about the relationship between employee engagement, productivity, and workplace respect so that we can all come out of this immediate health crisis with a deeper and better understanding of what our employees need in order to stay engaged and productive, because hiring talent simply isn't enough. We know that today's employees spend 50% more time collaborating or working on team-based work than they did 20 years ago. Knowledge and innovation are, vital sources of competitive advantage, really, in nearly every industry. So whether you're working in manufacturing, developing software, conducting research, advising your clients, or running multinational corporations, you're a knowledge worker, which means you have to bring your brain to work with you and collaborate with others on problems that are often perpetually changing. So again, hiring talent is enough. People actually need to be in a workplace where they're able and willing to use their talent to grow, to learn, and to collaborate. I like how Amy Edmondson puts it in her book, The Fearless Organization. She says, for knowledge work to flourish, the workplace must be one where people feel able to share their knowledge. And growth today is driven by ideas and ingenuity. And it's really about engagement, or the willingness to put discretionary effort into one's work. And yet 70 to 85% of the world's workforce is either not engaged or they're actively disengaged, meaning actively working against the company. So last year, Bonusly published research showing that less than a third of all employees were highly engaged in their work. And unfortunately, more than 1 in 7 were actively disengaged. In their State of the World report, Gallup found that 85% of the world's workforce was either underengaged or actively disengaged, and only 15% were highly engaged in their work. And that ratio was actually slightly grimmer even in Western Europe, where only 10% of people were highly engaged, or 10% of the workforce, and the remaining 90% was either underengaged or actively disengaged. And so why is this the case? Because we know that engagement is essential. And in fact, among those 10 to 15% of organizations whose employees were engaged, they had higher customer satisfaction, higher productivity, higher sales, and higher profitability. They also had lower turnover, fewer safety incidences, and fewer product defects. So better quality. This led the authors of the Gallup report to conclude that businesses that orient performance management systems around basic human needs for psychological engagement get the most out of their employees. And that businesses must recognize that an organization's vitality and capacity for organic growth is inextricably tied to the everyday experiences of its employees. Now, this is something that was understood by the creators of the Toyota Way, which is founded on the pillars of continuous improvement and respect for people. And principle number 5 of the Toyota Way says to foster a corporate culture that enhances individual creativity and teamwork value while honoring mutual trust and respect between labor and management. And this is the idea that respect for people is really about respect for life, or in Japanese, it's holding precious what it is to be human. As Toyota puts it, it's the idea that there's no limit to how far human wisdom can be developed, and that within the company, we continually aim to achieve mutual understanding, fulfill mutual responsibilities, and combine the power of our individual employees. Respect for people is the attitude that regards people's ability to think most. Now, if this idea isn't compelling in and of itself, I'd like to take a quick look at some of the quantitative research supporting the importance of respect in the workplace. Now, in 2016, the New York Times reported on a 5-year study at Google that was investigating what made the best teams. The initiative was called Project Aristotle, and it involved studying hundreds of teams inside of Google to figure out why some of them were struggling while others were thriving. And after scrutinizing the composition of the groups inside Google and looking at different factors like were the best teams made up of people who had similar interests, did it matter whether everyone was motivated by the same kinds of rewards? Were their educational backgrounds similar? Things like that. None of that really revealed any patterns. Nothing emerged. And so researchers quickly turned their focus to group norms and behaviors. And what they found was really interesting. They found that those good teams, or the teams that were thriving, team members on those teams actually spoke in roughly the same proportion. And the researchers called this equality in distribution of conversational turn taking. But it was just the idea that everybody got to share their voice. And on those teams that were struggling, it was often the case that there would be 1 or 2 authority figures or experts in the group that would basically dominate the entire conversation. They also found that on those good teams that were thriving, there was a high average level of social sensitivity, meaning that the team members were pretty skilled at sort of intuiting or understanding how one another felt, just based on the tone of people's voice, their expressions, and other nonverbal cues. And so what the researchers of the study concluded was that psychological safety, or this belief that a team environment is safe for taking interpersonal risks, that team members, had a sense of confidence that the team wouldn't be embarrassed or rejected or punished by speaking up, that it was because of that psychological safety and mutual respect that they were able to really thrive in this environment. And the authors say it was far and away the most important of all of the dynamics that they observed. And they described the team climate as being characterized by interpersonal trust and mutual respect, where people felt comfortable being themselves. And I think this is a really interesting example and a good reminder that oftentimes when companies do try to optimize everything, it can be easy to forget that success is built on the everyday experiences of the employees, just like that Gallup study said. Now, Harvard actually surveyed 20,000 employees recently to further investigate this relationship between respect and engagement. And what they found was that respect was the #1 behavior above all others that would lead to greater employee engagement and commitment. That the more frequently employees felt they were treated with respect, the more engaged they were. And employees actually reported that respect from their leaders had more significant positive impact than useful feedback, recognition, sharing the vision of the company, or even opportunities for personal and career development. The Society for Human Resources Management also conducted a similar study, and they found that 72% of employees at all levels within an organization said that respectful treatment was very important, making it the top contributor to overall job satisfaction. We know that respect can also be a stress reducer, and disrespect can be a stress causer. So leaders who come across to employees as domineering or threatening or intimidating actually diminish employee productivity, because what that behavior does is it triggers the release of cortisol and adrenaline. And this is a toxic cocktail of hormones and neurotransmitters that essentially shuts down the prefrontal cortex. And so it's literally inhibiting employees' ability to do their best work and potentially creating a mental state that is ripe for process mistakes and accidents. Depending on the industry we're working in, this can be actually have quite severe consequences. Dr. Sutherland had mentioned this issue in a hospital setting and how this led to frequent, mistakes that were actually impacting people's health and lives, right? But on the other hand, when leaders create a work environment that does consistently value and esteem and nurture their employees, it has a different effect. It actually triggers a collective brain chemistry that's rich in serotonin and oxytocin and dopamine. So in addition to enhancing focus and collaboration, that the presence of those hormones actually is correlated with higher employee engagement, which again is really significant because that means employees are more likely to give their highest level of discretionary effort when performing their work and actually care about the success of the organizations. Respect can also have ripple effects. So I thought this was really interesting. In 3 experimental studies, researchers found that witnessing disrespect enacted by an authority figure or a peer actually reduced the observer's performance on routine tasks and creative tasks. And so they had people just observe interactions between either authority figures or peers to other people where they would be treating them with disrespect. So it wasn't targeted at the observer. They were just simply witnessing. And the impact it had was that their subsequent reactions on brainstorming tasks were totally stifled. They stumbled on solving puzzles. They had external experts involved in this study that rated the products, and they actually ended up rating those from the witnesses of disrespect as significantly less creative. The researchers also found that people were 5 times less likely to be attentive to information that they were seeing, and they concluded that disrespect can actually tax working memory, and in doing so, it can decrease performance on cognitive tasks. But just as disrespect can spiral and influence, so too can respect. And this is the idea I'm hoping we all walk away with. So I briefly wanted to talk about an observation that James Womack made and published. James Womack was, father of the lean movement and spent some time observing the way that work was being done at Toyota. So I wanted to go through this example that he shares. He says, managers begin by asking employees what the problem is with the way that their work is currently being done. Next, they challenge employees' answers and enter into a dialogue about what the real problem is. They then ask, what is causing this problem, and enter into another dialogue about its root causes. Then they ask what should be done about the problem and ask employees why they have proposed one solution over another. They then ask how they, manager and employee, will know when the problem has been solved and engage one more time in dialogue on the best indicator. Finally, after agreement is reached on the most appropriate measure of success, the employee sets out to implement the solution. Now, James Womack said that over time, he came to realize that this problem-solving approach, this kind of A3 approach, was actually the highest form of respect. The leader is saying to the employee that they themselves can't solve the problem alone because they're not close enough to the problem to know the facts. He or she truly respects the employee's knowledge and their dedication to finding the answer. But the employee also can't solve the problem by themselves, because oftentimes they're too close to the problem, or they're lacking context to see the bigger picture, or they may refrain from asking tough questions about their own work. And so James Womack argues that it's really only by showing this mutual respect for both one another and each other's role that it's possible to solve problems, to make work more satisfying, and to move organizational performance to a higher level. So returning now to the pillars of the Toyota Way: continuous improvement and respect for people. I wanted to share another study by researchers Marcus Baer and Michael Frazee, because I think it does a really good job of demonstrating the intimate relationship between these two pillars. And so what these two researchers did was they took a sample of 47 mid-sized German firms in both industrial and services industries, and they measured performance across a number of different factors. What they found was that each of the 47 mid-sized companies were focusing on process innovation and continuous improvement, but not all of them had respectful, psychologically safe work environments. And in fact, only those companies who did have psychologically safe and respectful work environments were able to take advantage of the process innovation. It was only in those contexts where the process improvement efforts actually impacted performance. And this led the authors to suggest that while process improvement and process innovation and continuous improvement are absolutely essential for boosting productivity, that without a psychologically safe and respectful work environment, the impacts to productivity are impoverished at best. As they put it, innovation is not enough and needs to be complemented by a climate of psychological safety to be brought to its fullest potential. So I submit to you that you cannot have continuous improvement without respect for people.
We want to talk about an example of this in action. And this is the way I think about it. If you can show the Toyota Way there, Jessica, has continuous improvement and respect as its pillars. But Scrum itself, the term comes from Takeuchi Tanaka's paper looking at lean companies. And Scrum has the 3 pillars of transparency, inspecting, and adapting. And it has 5 values. And if you look at the values, they're all interrelated with the Toyota Way and the 3 pillars, and they enable it. So respect from the Toyota Way is the first Scrum value. Courage and openness need to go with it to expose what needs to be done. This is all about, enables the transparency in Scrum. And with the transparency, if you have the right focus, then you're inspecting this in the good way, and that's going to suggest adaptations that need to happen. And also, in order to get continuous improvement, there needs to be a commitment to make it happen. Okay, so these are all interrelated. And we're going to give you an example of this in action in a hospital setting. Recently, the lean process improvement leader from one of the biggest hospitals in Boston came to our Scrum training and said, "Hey, Jeff, do you think Scrum could help us at the hospital?" And I had spent a decade as a medical school professor working in hospitals, and also almost 20 years as CTO of companies, healthcare companies, working in hospitals. So I said, definitely yes. We've done a lot of work in hospitals, but it's very challenging because of the environment. But he said, we prioritized the things that need to be fixed in the hospital. And the top thing on the list is the turnaround time between surgeries and operating rooms. We have one of the biggest operating room facilities probably in the world. There are over 42 operating room suites in this hospital. Every suite has many surgeries per day. Every surgery has a team. And we've been trying for 20 years to shorten the turnaround time for the surgeries, because that improves not only the productivity of the environment, but enables us to do more surgeries per day. We have a big backlog of people waiting for treatment. So next slide, Jessica. So we said, okay, we're going to send a couple of coaches over there. We're going to implement Scrum at scale. Okay, so the distinguishing aspect of Scrum at scale is that it starts by focusing on the leadership. So we said, okay, for product owner cycle in Scrum at scale, it's guided by an executive meta Scrum. And this is a leadership team that has a vision that prioritizes everything in the organization, and that considers the operational aspects and monitors metrics that give insight. And in a commercial setting, they'll be monitoring revenue. That's an issue in the hospital as well. But here, they're also monitoring improvement in delivery of healthcare services. Along with that, we need a leadership team that's going to actually execute the plan. We call that an executive action team in Scrum. They have a strategy. They continually watch metrics. They focus on removing waste from the system, and they support the product owner and the Scrum Master cycles. They make sure that whole aspect of Scrum is working throughout the organization. So how does that look in the hospital? Okay, the next slide shows how they broke that up. So they said, okay, our executive meta Scrum will be the head of the hospital, chair of surgery, and the director of process improvement. They will decide, okay, what initiatives are we going to execute on? And we already know the top initiative is faster turnaround time, faster throughput in the surgery centers. The executive action team, these are the people responsible for implementation. That's going to be the head surgeon of the hospital, the head nurse of the hospital, and the head of anesthesiology for the hospital. So they will be guiding, measuring, setting things up so it actually works. So they pulled everybody together that was involved in surgery in the hospital and laid out, okay, here's the plan. We've got the priorities. Here's what we're going to do. Here's the strategy. The execution team, the chief product owner, is going to be the process improvement leader. And what we're going to do is every surgery is going to be a sprint. And that team will have a surgeon. The lead surgeon will be the product owner. The lead nurse will be the Scrum Master. And the team will include them plus other medical staff, the anesthesiologists, assistant surgeons, and the cleaning crew. And what we're going to do, next slide, is we're going to run a full sprint cycle for every surgery. And our goal is going to be to maximize the flow of completed work, but also the quality. It turns out anytime you improve something like this in a hospital, you not only get faster throughput, but you get reduced medical error. If the patient is in surgery for a shorter time, there's less pain and faster recovery. So all these things relate to actually the treatment, not just the timing. So for every surgery, and there are multiple surgeries per surgery suite per day, we're going to run the complete sprint cycle, starting with sprint planning. It's going to be very short, right? The surgery is only 1 to 2 hours max. So sprint planning, it needs to be done in 5 minutes. We're going to set this up. And then when we're done, the whole cycle includes not only the surgery itself, but the cleanup and the reset of the entire room. And we're going to do a review and retrospective on every surgery. And again, that is done fast as well. Well, the biggest problem that they had in implementing this and getting the team working is, the surgeons are God in the hospital, and the cleaning people, they're low life. And so the surgeons are treating the cleaning people like subhumans. And so we had to say to the surgeons, look, we're trying to shorten the cleaning cycle. The people that know most about this are the cleaning people. We are not going to have success unless you as the surgeon start treating the cleaning people as equals. You get them to speak as much as you do. You really listen. And at the end of the day, you do what they say. And, you know, the surgeons are pretty smart people, but also, you know, they can be egomaniacs. So you have to kind of bang them on the head. But they started cooperating. And as soon as they started cooperating, innovation started to happen. So next slide. So the result of this, within 2 weeks, we didn't do all the surgery rooms at once. We took, as we do in Scrum at Scale, we took a set of surgery rooms that they call a pod, and every surgery within those pods, which had 3 surgery suites. And within 2 weeks, we had cut the turnaround time from an hour to 30 minutes, the fastest time they had ever seen. The impact with that was now they can do 2 more surgeries today. They have a huge backlog at this hospital of people waiting for surgery. So next slide. Oh, okay. So there we are. So the bottom line is operating rooms are very costly. When I was doing studies like this in a previous institution, it was about $12,000 an hour to just have the operating room sit there. And that was 20 years ago. So it's probably even more than that now. So reducing that waste time in the surgery room is going to save them $60K per pod. And there are 15 to 20 pods. So, you know, we're talking about $1 million a day in cost savings. But even more significant, by increasing surgeries 20%, half of a hospital's revenue is surgery. And the revenue of this hospital is $7 billion a year. So increasing surgery 20% increases the revenue 10% while reducing cost. That's a $705 million opportunity for the hospital, plus, you know, $1 million a day. We're talking about $1 billion hit by 2 coaches being there for 2 weeks. So the impact of doing this right and doing it in a setting like a hospital is huge. And for the coaches and many of the people, the value was not necessarily in the money effect, but it was in the fact that they could treat more people who are on waiting lists for surgery who can't get treated. We're being able to treat more people at the treatment process itself by being more organized, smoother, more rapid, reduces medical error, increases the healthcare outcome, reduces the pain and suffering of the patient. So a major impact on the people going through the surgery in the hospital. So back to you, Jessica.
Yeah, thanks. I just think it's so incredible to see that by creating this environment of respect, this team was able to achieve these results. And really, it was only by getting that dysfunction worked out that they were able to get there. And so the thought I wanted to leave us with is the idea that the challenge for all of us in the Agile community is to embrace and explain the true nature of what it means to respect one another so that we can all move toward a better and new way of solving the world's problems together. Thank you.